process, because a lot of coaching involves seeing what's happening. You need to get into those classrooms, and you guys are going to be in classrooms. You guys will be working with teachers on even problem-solving teams and so on, so you're kind of observing the process. This is just a structure, and you can use practices to adjust this model here that I'm using to fit your style. So you and the teacher are going to determine what you're going to be looking for. Very key. If you're going to go in and watch a teacher, you don't want to go in and say, I'm going to watch you do this, this, and this. You sit down before you watch the teacher and say, what do you want me to look for? What are some key elements of this thing that you're teaching that you want to make sure I do? When I first started training, and when I first started doing a lot of things, I had people watch and see how many ums I did. I cut ums way, way down. Because it was something I didn't realize with my hand thing. I'll never cut that down. But it's just, I wanted to see how I was doing on that. So what do you want me to look for? Then you're going to build a checklist. You're going to put those things into a checklist. I want you to watch and see if I'm asking every student something. Am I focusing on one side of the room? I tend to focus on the right. Sorry guys, I keep trying to turn. Do I ignore a certain student all the time? Am I explaining the directions clearly? Whatever the teacher wants you to look for. Then you're going to do the observation. And then you're going to get feedback as soon as possible. You want to make sure that that feedback happens preferably later that day or sometime within the next couple days, because the teacher wants to know what you saw. If you're modeling how to do a new intervention, when I do my SIM training, it's another hat I do, I will often go into the classroom and teach a lesson for some new people. Because they want to see, how do you do this with my kids? Because it works here, but not with my kids. So if you can do it with students right there, they can see that. And if you're doing that, then what you do is you build that checklist. You model first, and the teacher watches you using that checklist. And then the next time you go in, the teacher teaches, and you use that same checklist. So they can see it in action and then put it in action. Remember to do both positive points and negative points. Help the teacher to make their own judgments. Again, that question, how did that go for you? What were some things that you thought went well? How do you think you reacted when Billy threw his pencil across the room? Whatever it happens to be. And then use all those partnership principles, making sure there's that voice and the choice and the practice and the reciprocity. And again, coaching should not be part of their formal observations. It's something that they're doing. I gave you a tool, and again, this is just something to give you a little bit of a model. So you have this. The website up in the top corner is a wonderful website, instructionalcoach.org. This is the site that Jim Knight does, and it's uploaded and things change all the time. This one happens to be, yours has got a cover page that mine doesn't have on it. So, this one is from 2008, but it gives you a little bit of an idea of, okay, what do I do now? And how you can work with the teacher. So what they've done is walked you through, I think it's 3 weeks of what might you do with a teacher. It has this classroom management cover page on it. Did you do it? I know it has a staple on it, but hopefully you'll read it. So it's giving you a little bit of a structure on what can I do. Okay, day 1, pre-comment. These are some things I can talk about on how to set up that checklist. They give you an observation tool on when you're looking at times. What happens at the beginning of the lesson, the very beginning of some of those anticipatory things. What are some things that are happening during the lesson? How much time is spent on whole group? How much time is spent on cooperative learning and so on? So you can figure that part out. Transitions. You can monitor the amount of time on transitions. One teacher that I observed had a 45-minute science lesson with 17 transitions in it. So out of that 45 minutes, I think he had about 15 that was true instruction. And we had a conversation about it. You know, I said, how did that go for you? They said, well, I did really well. Kids were engaged and so on. I said, yeah, they were. They were very engaged in your lesson. Let's look at this. I see that they went back and got something out of their toes. And then they went back and did something, and I talked through those transitions, and he went, really? I said, yeah. And we counted the number of minutes, and he was shocked. Because he could see it on black and white how much time he was losing. And I said, so can you tell me why you have the students move as much as you do? You know, movement is a great thing for kids to do, especially, I think it was a third grade classroom, especially for those younger kids. But I don't want them to get bored and they seem to get agitated and fidgety. So, well, I agree. How can we reduce some of those? Still give them the movement. What are some things they can do for movement and engagement that doesn't take as much time? So we took some time and talked through it, and I went back and observed, and I think he had 3 transitions, which were very appropriate. In a 45-minute lesson for third graders, to get them to move 3 different times was very appropriate. And he said, you know what, I'm getting through a lot more of my lessons. I said, I wanted to say bingo, but I didn't. So that's a tool for that. This one is for on-task and off-task behaviors. So you're observing and it gives you directions, and if they're on-task, you put a plus in the yellow, and if they're off-task, you put a 0 in the white. So then you can just very quickly count your yellows. So it's a quick way to do your data collection on that. It gives you an idea on how you do the data collection, and the person wants to work with you, so it's kind of working commitment with the teacher and so on. Putting that data on a pie chart is a really nice way to show the teacher what amount of time they're losing and where their instructional time is done. Very eye-opening for a lot of teachers to see, wow, you know, I am doing a lot of my time is wasted on behavior management. This is where you can start getting data on access to appropriate instruction. If you have your pie chart and you have a huge chunk of it in number 3, transitions, the yellow, do they have appropriate access to appropriate instruction in reading and math if a large chunk of their instructional time is transitions? Exclusionary factor data right there. But it's a great, what's nice about putting it on a chart is you don't have to say anything. You don't have to say, this is the data I collected when I did my observation. This is what we want, you know, most of the time we want to be doing in number 2 or number 4. What does it look like for you? What are you seeing? It's very helpful. And teachers don't always realize, you know, like that teacher, he was a phenomenal teacher. He didn't realize how much time he was wasting because it was such a routine for him. So, doing the pie chart. Then it gives you some tips on you're implementing something. Day 3 might be implementing a change. STOIC is something from Safe and Civil Schools. It's, how many of you know CHAMPS? So, great training. It's how you set up classroom management. Really works well when I teach the classes up at the U for the pre-service people. I do some of the CHAMPS information because it really helps them to think about what do I want from my structure. So you guys know how to read. I'm not going to read through all of it. So that's STOIC. And so now, page. Then there's a parent communication tool, making those calls. In the LA manual, there's no longer a parent-guardian questionnaire, a one-page thing that you mail out and hope you get something back. I know. And it's really, this is a pattern and a habit that's been really hard for me to get teachers to break, mailing that thing home. Intentionally in the manual, there's different sets of questions you ask at different tiers because there's different levels of information you need at the different tiers. Some teachers don't know how to go about those, so this gives teachers a little bit of a script on how you call a parent and ask them those questions. So there's that. Then day 4 would be conferencing. They've implemented something, you've observed it, what are you going to be doing? You might model it. and then what you're going to be doing in the next couple days. I just thought this would give you an idea of how do I go about doing this. It gives you a little bit of guide. It's not meant to be this is how you have to do it. This just gives you a possible option, gives you a structure and a framework to then adapt and adjust. And then the last thing is the pie chart afterwards, which of course will do. So, sounds easy, right? No? Oh, come on, I tried to make it sound easy. Some real common pitfalls when you're doing some coaching and when you're working with your colleagues and you're trying to do a system level change is coming in with a set agenda of this is what we have to do now. So thinking of those pitfalls and the agenda, making sure that the agenda is built collaboratively. The coach does not project as a collaborator. If you're not collaborating, if you're not having an interdependent relationship with your colleague, it's not going to be effective and you're not going to result in systems change. So you need to make sure that people feel like you are coming in to be a support system for them and not a dictator to them. Unfortunately, a lot of our changes, especially by using the new SRDI model, ends up feeling dictatorial because that's the way the law has changed. Gen Ed really feels like special ed is doing it to them. And that's something that we can't change. Anytime I get that, though, I always refer them to 125A.56, which is special for the Gen Ed law. It talks about pre-referral interventions. It have to be 2 documented pre-referral interventions prior to special education. That's in the Gen Ed rule. It was there long before IDEA was reauthorized. So it's there, it's the law. The data collection is something that they have to do, whether you're doing SRBI or discrepancy. So we're not doing it to them. We just are the gatekeepers to make sure that it's being done. The focus is not really clearly defined. Make sure when you're working with your teams that you really say, this is what we're going to work on this year. That's why I said in the beginning, have your plan for the year. What are some things you want to work on for the year? What are some areas that this building really needs to try to accomplish by the end of June? Or maybe do half-year goals. By end of first semester, we want to make sure that everybody has done benchmarks and looked at the benchmark data. That may be your only thing that you can do this year, but they collect and analyze benchmark data. And that's actually a good starting point. We actually, when we started doing some of this in HVID, we wouldn't let them do interventions based on that for 2 years. And by that point, it was like, well, we're seeing that these kids are struggling. It's like, I know, what can you do? We really wanted to build that urgency for them. So we had them just look at that benchmark data and kind of talk about it as their team. I know what I mean, aren't we? It worked though. So you build that need of looking at that benchmark data, following those kids for a couple of years of, this kid was low in this grade, this kid is low in this grade. Oh, okay, so now what can we do? What do you think we can do about that? So take steps as much as you can, as slow as you can, or as fast as you can. Some things that the feedback is not done. You go in, you work with the teacher, you watch them, and then it's 3 weeks later before they get their feedback. Might as well not have done it. That feedback to the teacher, to the team, to the problem-solving team, to whoever you're working with, needs to be done very soon after your observation, very soon after working with the problem-solving team. That's a juggling and a scheduling nightmare sometimes, especially for those of you that are in multiple buildings. Yeah. 9 of them. And they all have their special meetings on Thursday mornings. But, just trying to build in that this is the day that I'm here at this building, and so I'll observe you this week, and I'm back again next week from 7 to 9. So as soon as you possibly can on that, you're doing that observation. And the other one is that you talk too much. Zip it and listen. That's what you need to be doing. And you'll feel like you might be talking more in the beginning because you're going to be doing a lot of prompting questions. And that's okay. Prompting questions isn't talking too much. It's when you're giving the answers that you're talking too much. Try to help them to discover the answer. You may need to be giving them some answers and some guidance, but try to help them discover the answers. Then it's going to feel more ownership for them. So some tips. Make sure if you are doing an observation, make sure you really do co-construct that tool. There are some, if you're observing fidelity of some interventions, there are some pre-made intervention observation checklists. Obviously you can use those, but go through it with the teacher. If you're using a pre-made one, this is what the company says we should be watching for. Do you see this? You know, this is what I see this meaning, this is what I see this meaning. So at least they feel like they have some ownership of it. Listen. Listen after you've asked the question. Allow for that silence while they're processing and thinking. I tend to try to fill voids. Ask those prompting questions. Model what you want to see first. If they really don't know how to set up a graph, then model it. Okay, we're going to work on this for this student. This is what I would do if I were to set up this graph. How often do you think you're going to do your progress monitoring? Once a month? Okay, that's great, once a month. We need to have at least 8 data points in order to make a decision, so I'll see you in May if you're doing it once a month. So just some of those things about why you're doing some of those interventions and why you're setting things up that way. You need to have those data points to make a decision. So you can do the I do it, we do it, where the teacher would observe you first. Then start and end the conversation with positives. So that you come in and you're setting it up and, thanks for tapping into my services. I'm really excited to work with you. I've heard some really good things about you. So-and-so says you're a great teacher. Let's talk about this. And end it with, this is exciting. I think we're going to make some positive changes and those types of things. Don't use attributes. Use specifics. Saying that you did some really good behavior management is not giving them anything. When Billy threw his pencil across the room, this is how you responded, and I saw that to be very positive. Or I saw that to agitate Billy, and then something else happened. You're a really positive teacher. Great, what does that mean? I saw you give feedback to Diana about how she responded really well to that question. That really made Diana feel positive. That was a great tool that you used. So being specific. And we don't think we need to be like that with our colleagues, but we do. They need to have the specificity just as much as our students need to have it. So they know what are the positive things. Offering support as changes are happening. Acknowledging that change is difficult. And that's really where your role comes in. Change is difficult. I'm here to support you. What can I do to help you? What can I do to help you to understand why we're doing this? So they're able to do that. Positive defiance. Interesting, isn't it? It's building up capabilities that people already have rather than telling them how they need to change. So we're building on what they have rather than telling them this is what you need to do and this is how you need to change.